Call the meeting to order. Everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up we have National Merit Scholarship finalists.
Yep, and I'll start that off. Thank you very much, Mr. President. So tonight we're going to honor two very impressive young scholars. So the National Merit Scholarship Program is a program that honors excellence and commitment. I'm going to share just a little bit about the numbers as we invite Principal Ballard up to introduce our scholars. So the numbers, 3.5 million high school students participate in taking the assessment that qualifies you for this program. Of that, to reach the commended level, only 50,000 students. That's a small little sample of that. To reach the semifinalist level, now we're down to 16,000. It represents less than 0.5% of all the students in their grade to get to this honor. It takes a lot of work, very impressive. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ballard to introduce our National Merit Scholar finalists.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. The first person I'd like to introduce is Logan Ion to my left. Logan has applied to 12 different colleges and waits to hear back from all of them. He shared with us that Miss Ellingson is the teacher that's had the largest impact on him. As well as one of the things that he liked is that we have rater time, so that Logan's been able to, as he's adjusting such a rigorous schedule, he's been able to connect with the various teachers. Logan does have Tourette syndrome, and just wanted to make sure I shared that he's so very appreciative of all of the support that all of the teachers throughout his entire journey here at Hudson have been able to provide. Logan has spent a lot of time volunteering at Hudson Prairie and also enjoys art, painting and drawing. So congratulations. I mean, as Mr. Grambo had indicated, just such an honor to be up in that less than 1% of all students. So very proud of Logan Ion for being a National Merit Scholarship finalist. Congratulations, Logan. The second individual I'd like to share is Shlok Jani. Shlok is waiting to hear back from 19 different colleges that he's applied to. He would like to study either computer science or physics in college. Shlok identified Miss McLaughlin as one of the teachers that has had the greatest impact on his career. And also shared with me, I found this to be really interesting, that he and 35 other students were chosen to do a research at Yale last summer in astrophysics, and he's currently studying with a U of M professor researching and searching for gamma ray bursts at night. Shlok hobbies include violin, and he's also a black belt in the martial arts. So congratulations to Shlok Jani and being a National Merit Scholarship finalist.
All right.
Thank you. Very proud of these two young men.
Sure. Before you guys sit down, is there any board members that wanted to ask any questions or make comments? Heather.
So congratulations. I think it's really important for folks who are watching to know that this is not just about test results. So it's not like they whittle it down and the better and better scores make it, that you make the cut. And then basically you have to prove that you are much more than a good test taker. You have to prove that you're a good student, that you're a good member of your community. You have to attest to your volunteer work, your extracurricular work. So it is a wow to be in the position that you guys are, and I think it's important to note that it is about so much more than being an obviously really smart student who does really well with tests, but that you guys are just incredible, well-rounded students and members of our community. So huge congratulations to both of you, and good luck with your dozens of schools. I hope you land a great one and that they give you a really good offer with scholarships and financial aid.
All right. Anyone else? Well said, Heather. Thank you. And I have recognized Shlok from, you've been here to school board meetings before, right? And was that the geography bee or the spelling bee or both?
Both.
That's what I thought. I remember. Yeah. And do you have a younger brother that is also?
Yeah, Sharp.
Okay, well, just tell him we expect to see him here this summer, all
No
right?
pressure, no pressure.
All right, great job, guys. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, next up will be winter athletics. And so Aaron, you want to kick it off with who's going to be our main speakers? And
Yeah, if you want to kick to that first slide, I'll start us off here. Wonderful group of individuals behind me. They'll come talk about their respective sports, but I think just glancing at this first page with some key highlights kind of identifies a lot of success this winter. I want to point out the depth of involvement and success off and on, or on and off the court, rink, mat, wherever they're participating. We look at our top senior GPAs. It is really, really pointed into who ends up getting that award. It's very close. There are tons and tons of students that would really do a great job in that honor, but are just a little bit behind. There's so many qualified student athletes fighting for that top spot. So congratulations to those individuals. We had 4 conference championships this winter. Tons of state qualifiers. As I was just talking with Mr. Miner about, our drum line was very busy over the last 2 months. That send-off has become a great tradition that I know the students have really latched onto and done a great job with. So we're doing that in the passing period right before advisory. The drum line leads out the state qualifiers. They lead up to the stairs. We take a picture, we celebrate, and we send them off with some positive thoughts and well wishes. So lots of state activity. We still have one group remaining, boys basketball, who's going to start us off. But so far we have 4 state championships out of those send-offs. We have 2 individuals in Andrew Hansen in the 500 freestyle and boys swimming, Liam Neitzel in 106 pounds wrestling, and the Raiders went and took 2 championships this year at their state competition for the first time, which was a great accomplishment. So without further ado, I'll bring them up, starting with boys basketball, to speak about their sports.
Thanks for having us, guys. I'll start. My name's Ben. This is Ben.
I'm Tyler.
Yeah. So this season it's been very successful so far. We've grown extremely close as a team throughout the year, and I think that's a key part in our success. We've played many competitive games, and we achieved a regular season record of 18-6. So just to start, we were predicted to be 6th in conference at the start of this year. And I think growing as a team and having fun, we've achieved a 13-1 record in conference, and we were able to be conference champions. Along with that, we were regional champions just the other day, and we're competing in the sectional semifinals on Thursday in Stevens Point. If any of you guys want to make the trip, love to see you. Thank you.
all right. Great job, guys. We start off with the one team doesn't have their season done yet, but I do have it on my calendar for Saturday, so I'm kind of assuming you're going to win Thursday, all right? All right, next up, who do we have? All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Grace.
And we were captains on this year's team. We had an awesome year. This was one of the best teams I've ever played on. Our team chemistry was awesome. Everyone was so fun to be with. It was a bit of a smaller team this year. We only had 10 girls, but it was, I think, for the better, and everyone was so close, and it was so fun. Our overall record was 21-5, which we were very proud of and happy with. And overall, we had a ton of youth players come at games, which is so fun. We helped at in-house a ton. So it was you kind of get to know them by name, and they, love seeing you on the court. Awesome parent group, definitely, had so much support from the parents. And then we organized a cancer game with the doubleheader with River Falls, which River Falls is one of the biggest rivals. So doing the doubleheader was fun, and we were able to raise a lot of money to donate, which was awesome.
Some of our key accomplishments were going 14-0 in the conference, which led us to be conference champs, which was one of our biggest goals at the beginning of the season. We earned the 4 seed in playoffs, and it's in one of the most tough sections, so that was a big accomplishment of ours. And then our coach, Jess, received her 100th win, which was really cool, too. Cool to experience it with her.
All right.
Thank you.
Great job.
Hi, we're from the Hudson Cheer and Stunt Team. My name's Claire,
I'm Ashley.
and we had a really great season this year. We started out with a ton of new people on our team, so we had to get them used to doing it. And yeah, we just kind of had the opportunity to go to a ton of competitions this year, and then we also had opportunities to perform at Pep Fest and some of the basketball games.
Our key accomplishments is that we took first at 3 of our biggest competitions. We took third at prelims, and we made it to state and took fifth. And we accomplished a lot of individual goals that were set at the beginning of the season.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us. I'm Addie.
I'm Hannah.
And this year we had a lot of new blood. We had 21 girls. In our freshman year we had 8. So we have a pretty small gym, but we have a lot of girls just going at it. Just there's one girl flipping on beam, and you see another flying off bars. Sometimes it's a little scary, but love to see it.
I would say some of our key accomplishments this year, a big one was going to state, especially with the growing team. I think going to state really said something about how the program is growing. To go to state, we made a record for our season with a 135, which was big. We also hosted a lot of successful home meets, and then we succeeded in some of our team goals that we made at the start of the season.
We had 2 qualifying individuals as well for state, which was Brianna Johnson and Emily. And we had very successful home meets this year. And we also had 2 new coaches, Bailey and Kevin, which was a pretty big change, but also they really balanced each other out. So I think we had a really successful year, making it to state finally for team.
Thank you.
My name's Oliver. I was one of the captains for the boys hockey team. The other 2 captains couldn't be here. But this year faced us with a lot of new challenges. We had a brand new head coach this year. We faced actually a lot of illnesses. We had a lot of guys out at a lot of time. And we had the pressure of winning state from the 2 years previous. So this year we were projected not to be good at all. We were projected pretty low in our conference. And we actually ended up winning our section and made it to state. For our Hockey Fights Cancer game, we raised just under $10,000 for the Rhinos Foundation, and that went to a community member in Hudson. This year we had 5 people be mentioned or be on an all-conference team, and then we had 4 people be either mentioned or be on an all-state team. We didn't have a very good. We were 17-9 through the record. We had a pretty long losing streak, so we had to overcome that. And then I feel like that just brought everyone closer, and it made it a lot of fun.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. I'm senior captain Avery Heider, and then I'm joined with another senior on the team, Kaylee Prater, who was our all-team point leader. As it says, we had a lot of injuries and illness this year, which caused us to go on a 7-game losing streak. Overall, we had only 10 wins and 12 losses. So going into playoffs, we had to do some gut checks, think about our leadership, how we can all step up, take playoffs as a clean slate, and then we ended up winning all 3 of our playoff games and qualified for state, which was something that we were all super proud of, that we were able to take a quick turnaround like that. We ended up losing in the state section final last Thursday, but I think we all were very happy with our accomplishments this year. Thank you.
senior captain Maya Hooper.
I'm Haley Plaird. I'm also a senior captain. This year was very successful. We made history by winning our first double state championship this February, and we were also able to do many exhibition performances. These performances were with nationally recognized teams such as the University of Minnesota dance team. In addition, we have performed at community events including parades, Booster Days parade, football games, and basketball halftimes. And all our hard work definitely paid off.
So we had a lot of really good placements this year. Starting off last July, we placed first in our home routine at our week-long UDA camp that we go to. We try to go every other year. We had 6 seniors who were awarded All-American dancers. At our Menominee Holiday Classic this December, we had a clean sweep. We took first in all 4 of our dances. At Little Chute, we had 2 first places, a second place, and then a 6th place, we got some tough competition over there. Like Haley said, we danced at the University of Minnesota's Best of the Best, and we also performed at the Edina Invite over in Minnesota. We were Big Rivers Conference champions in kick and jazz. And at regionals, we placed first in jazz and second in kick. Then we were off to state, and the rest is history.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Isaac.
I'm Justin.
We had an incredible season. We were undefeated in dual meet play and broke 5 school records, 3 pool records, and 2 conference records. We also won conference and sectionals at state. We qualified 10 out of the 12 events and placed 12 overall, which is highlighted by Andrew Hansen breaking the 500 freestyle state record.
Some key accomplishments. We won the Bengal Invite, Husky Invite. We were BRC champs. It's our 3rd time in 4 years. We were sectional champs, our 3rd time in 4 years. Some state highlights are Andrew Hansen was the state champ of the 500 freestyle and got 3rd in 200 free. Jackson Rodriguez got 2nd in diving. Jarrett Mollis got 9th in the 100 backstroke. And Brady Wayopa got 13th in the 100 breast. Thank you.
I'm Liam, and 2023 was yet another tremendous season for the wrestlers. At every event, we always have the biggest team and the most fans. We spent the entire season ranked in the top 10, holding a steady number 6.
I'm Ethan, and then some key accomplishments we had. It's our 14th BRC title in the last 20 seasons. We had 5 individual sectional champions. We had 6 state qualifiers, 3 place winners, Liam Neitzel, Ethan Winkleman, and Natalie Clavetter. Liam Neitzel became Hudson's 5th ever state champion. And then Ethan Winkleman set the season pin record. Ryan Rambo joined the 100 career wins club. And Coach Chris Hansen became the biggest Rivers Conference all-time winningest coach with 107 and 7 career record.
All right.
So
that's awesome. And I have to ask, Liam, since I wrestled your weight class, only back then it was 98 pounds. How much weight have you put on since the season ended? Yeah.
He weighed 136 last night.
Wow.
So to close, I just want to point out, I have the privilege of being able to meet with a lot of these individuals that are captains. We do a captain's council at the beginning of the year, and we talk a lot about work ethic and character and how to do things the right way. And we do that in the principle that if we do those things the right way, all the success will follow right behind. And I think this group is a walking image of that philosophy. So I'm really proud because I think you heard some undertones in some of them that they weren't expected to do well this year. Some had high expectations as we want them to, but some had realistic expectations too and put in that work. And I think if you've ever been in the high school in the evening, these are the kids that are putting in that time and that dedication and that work to achieve these accomplishments. So we appreciate you having us here today. Thank you for all the support, and spring sports started today. You wouldn't know it looking outside, but track was in the building. So have a great rest of your night.
Congrats. Congrats to all the kids that made it. I guess we have,
I think we let these guys go. I know
Yeah.
that it's an exciting meeting
Right.
for them, but
well, wait, we have the auditor's report coming up. You know.
it's nothing clears a room like an auditor's report. Yes.
All right, we have one citizen request to speak, and it's Erin Gerlach of Cooley Trail in Hudson. She has a suggestion for the drug issue.
Hi. I just wanted to share some thoughts on an idea I had regarding listening through the last few board meetings with the presentation regarding like the drug bus and the vaping issues, and hearing concerns about the parents who spoke about their kids having bathroom issues, not drinking enough water all day long, and the kids saying that those are the drug bathrooms. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And that they smell. My daughter and her friends purposely actually avoid certain bathrooms because they smell like vape. And so all of these concerns have been brought to you guys by the parents over the last couple of weeks here. Last week there was the SRO presentation, and they mentioned prevention programs, increasing funding and intervention, and adding some staff. And I personally think that those are great ideas, and adding another SRO just for the middle school would be a great addition. But I understand that costs, play a big effect into that. So when they were talking, I kind of just started brainstorming a little bit. That's what I do for my job. And I was just thinking, what if the district had some sort of a text or a QR code reporting system? So that would work by simply numbering the bathrooms A1, B2, C3 with large vinyl lettering on the walls inside the room, and then on the outer door frame to identify the bathrooms inside and out. And there would be something, I'm just suggesting, like a QR code that maybe would be on the wall, maybe it's on the bathroom stalls, not sure, but that would be one way, a one-way QR code that opens up a text that would go directly to an SRO officer reporting system and would indicate the bathroom number, the time, the date, the phone number that it's being sent from, along with maybe, if you guys wanted, a basic 1, 2, 3 survey that they could report an issue on, maybe even a blank field for a name. It's kind of like the radio stations, what they do when they have you call in, they say text this word to this number, kind of the same concept. So anyhow, it would be a really inexpensive text management system. Ultimately, district would be looking at a cost to number out the bathrooms, put some wall posters up, and make that happen. QR codes are easy to custom build and would open up text messages to be filled in with the questions that pertain to these types of issues. Using a QR code or a reporting phone system would prevent the SRO's phone number from being given out, and also deter crank calling. High schoolers probably like to do that. While having a record of the number that it's being sent from, which would be really important to record that, and the time and the date on the calls, so they could go back on the cameras and review who is going in and out of these bathrooms at this time. If the students, obviously if they're suspected of activity, their parents would obviously need a phone call and politely just make them aware of the issue, not saying that their kid is part of that, but just saying, hey, your kid has been in these bathroom parts and they've been reported so many times. I just want you to be aware of it. Obviously, the school board has great policies in place for if they are caught, those are in there. And so anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you. I'm quite certain there's IT companies and other people in Hudson that would be happy to come up with and build a program out like this to maybe make a difference. And I can see this really getting much larger and being passed around to other school districts as well. So I just wanted to share that with you. I did mention this to the SR officers in the hallway after the last meeting. They seemed like they really liked it and wanted to hear more about it. So I just wanted to share that with the board.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up, we have our independent auditor's report.
I'll turn it over to Bob. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Sure, so we have Jonathan Sherwood here. He completed our audit from last fiscal year, and he's going to give a presentation of the highlights of our audit.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. Again, my name is Jonathan Sherwood. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. I'm primarily responsible for the day-to-day field work of the nuts and bolts of bringing the audit together. And then my team and my quality reviewers basically double-check everything that we're doing, making sure that we're in compliance with our GASB pronouncements, which has been quite interesting the last number of years. And then obviously responsible for the full issuance of the audit report. So again, I did provide a 2-page handout. I think that might be the full-on governance letter there, and I'll make some comments to that too here for you. But first off, on my list of agenda items that I want to cover for you is just obviously just addressing kind of the elephant in the room as far as audit timing. The reason that I'm here in March versus when I'm normally here in December or January at the latest. The last number of years, there's been some very complex and complicated changes to these the GASB pronouncements, rules and regulations that we have to abide by as independent auditors. The biggest one in the last 12 months has been GASB 87, which is leases. Not to bore anybody to death, but it's definitely added a significant amount of work to our plate this last number of years, as well as changes to the overall audit reports. So kind of the perfect storm, so to speak, of a lot of additional work on our end, compressed timeframes, and then just straight up just a resources issue as well, as just trying to manage project management and all of it kind of snowballing on us at the end here. So definitely additional work that we've worked with the admin staff and finance, pulling all that information together for us. So definitely kudos to you and your staff, Bonnie, of helping us out along the ways. But that's basically the reason why we're here now in March with a slight delay of not having a couple of staff here for last board meeting. But our hope is obviously to get back on more of a normal audit schedule here, so long as our GASB pronouncements can slow down in the next couple of years. That's our hope, but I won't hold my breath here at times. As far as that goes then, just to dive into the rest of my comments for you, I mentioned the auditor's opinion or the auditor's report. So that's basically just the assurance that CLA puts on the financial statements, the amounts and the disclosures of the financial statements. That's really the only thing that we at CLA technically quote-unquote own. The rest of the numbers in there, again, are compiled and audited based on all the records that were provided by finance and the various department heads. So as far as the opinion that we were able to place over the financial statements, we clarify that as an unmodified opinion or a quote-unquote clean opinion. So there isn't any amounts or disclosures within your financial statements that would lead a reader of your financial statements to go array, or so to speak, just to, everything that's in your financial statements are as they should be. So it's the highest level of assurance that we can issue on audited financial statements, and that's what DPI strives and actually requires you to obtain annually. So we're happy that we can continue that going forward. We also issue what's known as the management letter or the governance letter, which I believe is up on the screen here for us. And normally there's a number of items in these audit letters or these management letters that we're required to bring up to governance and say, here's what your issue was last year, here's how we're addressing it. In the past, Hudson School District has been on top of the ball, but we've usually only reported back one finding or one issue, just to let you guys know that, as part of us doing the audit, we also then draft your financial statements. There's been a little bit of a change in how we've approached this because we're getting a lot of feedback from federal agencies that we have to continuously report this finding. So what is the district doing about it? And historically it's been every year you contract with CLA and we prepare your financial statements. So we actually took a look at it as a firm and as an industry. What can we do in order to eliminate these findings and eliminate this feedback from the federal government? And we're happy to report that during 2022, 2021, 2022 fiscal year, the district has enough resources and knowledge, skills, and experience within your finance department for your staff to maybe not necessarily undertake the nuts and bolts of the drafting of the financial statements, but the ability to understand, okay, this is what CLA is doing for us, here's where the amounts are coming from, and basically walk you through, and you clearly have the ability, from a resources standpoint, again, we have more resources in order to stay on top of the GASBs and explain them to you, with you guys to be able to, quote unquote, accept responsibility over the full understanding. So a long way of saying, we used to have one finding we'd always have to report annually. And this year we were able to. We felt as a firm that you guys have enough of the skills, knowledge, and experience that we can eliminate that finding. So you actually have no management letter comments in that regard that we need to report back to any of the federal agencies or DPI. As also part of our audit, we also conduct what's known as a single audit or a compliance audit, and that's for any organization that receives over $750,000 of federal funding. So because of that, we have to do a compliance audit and look at all of the federal programs and make sure that the district's in compliance with all of the stated rules and regulations at the federal level, as well as the state level. So in this case, we do have one material weakness to report. It shouldn't be that unusual or that's irregular or unique for those that have been on the board for a while to hear about this one, because it has to deal with the special education program at the state level. It requires teachers that provide special ed services to maintain the proper licensure. At DPI, I'm going to refer to this one in your specific case for what happened during the year as more of a quote-unquote regulatory finding. So annually, DPI obviously works very closely with districts to make sure that you have staff that are properly licensed. In this specific instance, there was a staff member that was hired without the proper licensure, which is completely normal, and then normally during a normal situation, they go and get licensed appropriately. In this case, this staff member started and left within a time frame. They were no longer employed at the district, but because they provided services during the year, they technically didn't have a license and weren't properly licensed during that time frame. Again, normally in a normal year, you have the ability to rectify that, get them appropriately licensed, and then you're all well and good and in the clear. In this case, because of the staff turnover, there was no need for you to follow up and get them relicensed or get them licensed because they're no longer providing those services. So in this case, DPI, this employee's name showed up on the DPI list saying they weren't licensed. Therefore, as an auditor, I'm required to report that back to DPI saying, yes, you're right. Here's this person. They provided services and they weren't licensed. So we're working with DPI to figure out, because this isn't the first time that you guys have been dinged for this specific instance where you've done everything, all the due diligence that DPI required you to do. But because of the regulatory, they show up on this list, now it's a finding. So we're working with them very closely going forward saying, okay, you're not the only ones that have experienced this. How do you want me, CLA, to report this back to you? And currently right now the feedback from them is, they're on the list, they didn't have a license, it's a finding. So that's the finding that we're talking about. So long-winded way of saying there isn't any red flags from an audit perspective of saying here's a major issue that you haven't yet done anything about, or you aren't currently having some internal controls or whatever in place in order to monitor that. Also, as part of just the regular auditing services and consultation services that we provide for you, we also then help with the annual reporting and making sure that if there's any edit checks or anything like that, Tracy will attest to this, making sure that we get any error checks that what the district has uploaded on DPI's website matches with the audited financial statements. So we help and coordinate all of that fun and excitement every year as well. And then the last report that we have to do is back to the federal agencies known as the Federal Data Collection Form. That has to do with all your federal funding, and that's a separate reporting that we do back on behalf of the district as well. And I don't know if everybody has the two-page handout or if they can bring that up for us. Under the, the general fund there, we can start diving into some financial data. And again, my comments are going to be extremely brief in terms of without putting everybody to sleep. I already chased all of the future leaders here out of the room just with the even thought of being an auditor. So, for the purposes of my comments here, the general fund in this standpoint, some people might follow the DPI fund numbers. So this is Fund 10 and 27 are brought together here for this report. So it's regular education or regular instruction, as well as the special education services provided. They're all combined here. And really, in this 4-year trend analysis, the top half here is just your balance sheet. This is, it's a snapshot in time. So it's as of June 30th year ends, dating back to 2019. So from this standpoint, let's look at the trends. What's increasing, what's decreasing. If they're, if the assets on the books, if all of a sudden they're nosediving, what's the reason for it, what's the major changes. So really, over the last number of years, amounts for the most part have stayed pretty consistent. So as far as like an analysis of what kind of, where my comments are going to be directed for you this evening, it really jumps all the way down to the fund balance section there for us. So you've got the non-spendable, restricted, committed, and unassigned. So this is when we're looking at, just trying to equal everything out with an equal measuring stick. What is the fiscal health of the district? So again, for fund balance purposes, this is your equity section. It falls into a number of categories that are available for you. The first up there being is non-spendable. So these non-spendable items, these are resources that you have as a district, but they've either already been spent in like a prepaid type situation, or another action has to occur in order for us to then get those resources and have them available to you, either due to timing or collection or something like that. So for our purposes, the 279 is basically locked up resources. We can't do much with it, the 279,000 amount. The next bucket we have available to us is restricted. So this is restricted from an outside agency. So either a donation or a granting agency has given us funds for an earmarked specific purpose, and the district has yet to meet those purposes. So for the last couple of years, you've had restricted for the Common School Fund. Those are state issuances that came into you, and you haven't yet met the requirements under that granting program. So these are the carryovers which we'll be using in a future period. Then the next is the committed fund balance. So these are commitments that at a board level, you've identified either the purpose and or dollar amount, or have said, okay, this is what we want to set aside these balances for, with the total amount to be kind of analyzed at the end of the fiscal year to say what's available to us that we can set aside for these purposes. The first one has been that the self-insurance funding, and then you've historically always had the long-term capital facility planning. So you can see in both instances for 2022, that balance is actually increased for both of those line items. So again, it's committed from a board level. It must be used for that specific reason, unless the board then has formal action to take those dollars and use them for something else. So they must be used for those purposes until a different formal action has taken place from everybody in this room around the tables here to formally use that for something else. So it all kind of factors down to then what is your unassigned fund balance. This is your true reserves of the general fund of the operations of the district. So from an outside perspective, myself, somebody like myself, an independent auditor or a bonding agency is going to look at what is your unassigned fund balance and how does that compare to what your total expenditures are for the year. So again, that's another way of saying, okay, you've got money sitting aside or you've got resources set aside, and this is then compare that to what your total expenditures are going to be. What do we need in order to operate the district from one year to the next? So you compare the 28 million to the 73 million in total expenditures, and we compute a ratio there. So this is the ratio of unassigned fund balance as it compares to total expenditures. So we calculate this ratio. It's at 38.4%. So ultimately, what does that mean for us? Well, the district, a number of years ago, as required by GASB, the accounting standards setters, right? The district policy states that at a minimum, our unassigned fund balance will be 25 to 30%. So great, that is a true minimum. You're exceeding your minimum. So now kind of what the next way of looking at it is, okay, how do we compare to our peers? And within Western Wisconsin, the average is anywhere between 27 and 32% of, again, what your minimum fund balance should be at times. So again, you're exceeding that, that minimum. 38%. And then we're looking at what the industry target would be. And again, industry would be nationwide. Typically, the general quote-unquote rule of thumb is anywhere between 25 and 33% is what we would expect to see, again, at a minimum, to consider a district financially healthy. So clearly, you're meeting all of those minimum targets at 38.4%, which is a slight downturn from 2021 numbers. And that is an expected decrease in those two metrics because of the significant financial impact from COVID funds and additional federal funds that were flowing into 2021. So that's one of the reasons why 2021 is so, fiscally healthy from that standpoint. It's a little bit of a drawdown in that metric. So overall, again, the general fund and special education activities within what it takes to educate a student in Hudson school districts here, you're fiscally healthy, you're financially healthy. So the benefits of that, you completely alleviate and avoid any short-term borrowing needs due to the collection cycle of property taxes in the state of Wisconsin and how state funding then times that out, the timing of when those payments come in, I should say. There's a lot of other communities, even within our region here, that have to rely on short-term borrowing needs throughout the year to meet basic things like payroll or other debt service requirements, just because those cash payments are due at any one time. So you're completely avoiding that and avoiding any interest payments that might be needed accordingly. It also then does allow some financial flexibility for you. So if you do have long-term capital needs, you can obviously have set-asides like you have in a committed fund balance, or even use up some of these unassigned funds in order to meet the capital needs, in those kind of one-time type purchases. Because again, this is a carryover balance. You don't want to live off of these reserves for recurring things like salary increases or whatnot. You definitely can increase your expenditures, but obviously these reserves would get, depreciated very quickly and depleted very quickly. So from a capital standpoint, that's usually why we say you can do these, one-time or unexpected needs can come out of these funds pretty easily for you. And then also then as a benefit of having such a fiscally healthy fund balance there, it definitely would, in the need for going out for long-term borrowings, you would get much more favorable repayment terms, such as lower interest rates or greater repayment terms in order to lessen the impact going forward. So again, just all decent things for, great things for the district, nothing really new in terms of financial health of the district over the last number of years. You've basically held the line, so to speak, and controlled your budget to actual expenditures very well over the last number of years. Switching gears then to page 2 here for you, or the special revenue funds. So again, we talked general fund, and now this is all the other activity that we have to report separately to DPI. So these are fiscal year ends, the reserves or the surpluses in all of these funds accordingly. So the special revenue funds, they're set aside for a specific purpose. So any revenue source going into them are restricted and to be used specifically for things like the education trust or all of your scholarships and any other like granting or gifting options out there. So your Fund 21 is in here as well. Your food service fund is Fund 50. And then your education and recreation are your Fund 80s for those that speak fluent DPI with me. Again, here the big analysis from my standpoint is the revenue that's coming into these are restricted for a purpose. So when we look at a lot of these, it's okay if the money coming in is set aside for these activities. Are those activities carrying their weight? Do we need to increase fees in order to at least break even, or hopefully in the terms for like food service, you want them to build up a surplus after a while, because that's where all of your capital expenditures are going to be coming from for replacing capital items, refrigerators, stoves, that type of equipment. So in this case, you can see that everything is positive at this point in 2022, which is an improvement, especially in the terms of the education and recreation in your Fund 80 situation. The large negative that was created in 2020 and 2021, we can just always blame COVID. When in doubt, blame COVID. We had the expenditures that were still sitting in there in Fund 80, but clearly if you're not bringing in charges for services because you're not offering them to people, you kind of go into the negative for a few years. So 2022 in that regard is more or less a return to normal with those activities now being offered again. So the hope would be that that activity continues, and in a quote-unquote normal time frame, if you start seeing some of these activities slip, well then you either need to readjust what expenditures are going in there, or really what the biggest driver that you can control in that standpoint is charges for services. So you'd need to increase costs or fees for instance, education and recreational purposes. The other major issue obviously looking at there is food service. You can see that it was 0 for a few years, and then all of a sudden it jumps to 1.2 million. The biggest reason, again, is federal aids due to COVID. There's additional federal grant revenues that were available to Fund 50, and clearly the district capitalized on that, as is the case with just about every district around. The way that they changed the child nutrition fiscal cluster basically all schools were able to offer free and reduced lunches to basically all students versus meeting those eligibility requirements. That is the main driver as to more revenue in that fund when realistically your expenditures for offering that service stayed roughly the same over the last number of years. To move on to your debt service fund, you do have $3.5 million that's set aside in there. Again, those are reserves that will be used up as you pay down the long-term bonds and notes that will be drawn down over the number of years to meet future principal and interest payments. So there's $3.5 million sitting in there at the end of 2022. The other stat that I'll throw out there is during 2022, as far as principal and interest payments that were made, principal was about $4.3 million and interest was about $2.8 million in total expenses then that were charged to the debt service fund. So obviously the revenue going in there is straight tax levy is the offset to cover those expenditures. And then lastly we have capital projects funds. So there's two capital projects funds that are reported within your financial statements. The first being the site expansion and remodeling capital projects fund, and then there's a long-term capital projects fund. The long-term capital projects fund was basically started in 2020. That's a DPI requirement. It's basically you fund it, and then kind of the clock starts as far as funding that, and then incurring additional revenues and expenditures needs to sit in there for a period of time with a plan in place at DPI in order to meet those requirements. So a lot of districts did exactly what you did here is you started the clock, so to speak, and funding it in 2020, and now you're just waiting for the period of expenditures to be available to you to utilize that long-term capital projects fund. The remaining balance in the site expansion fund actually goes back into the 2017 or 2018 timeframe of when the first round of bonds were issued. So these are excess bond proceeds from that original borrowing. And there is, I know, at least at one point, there was a laundry list of items of here's what projects that were that are eligible to be funded by those dollars, and it was just a matter of which project was going to get funded first as far as a wish list, so to speak. So those projects can definitely and will be taken from those proceeds first before any additional funds would need to be used. The last item I have for you here is just your long-term obligations. So these are all of the long-term debts issuances. You've got two issuances that are considered general obligation bonds, and one of them that's a general obligation note. So the total outstanding debt is about $73.3 million. The total issuances will start to mature and fall off of your debt payments starting in 2027. And then the bulk of them is that debt issuance I mentioned earlier that occurred in 2017. That'll won't final mature until 2036. So that balance of the 73 million, you've got about 62 million that is going to be outstanding and get paid off through 2036. So that basically leads you down to the very last percentage I have for you this evening as far as your general obligation debt limit. So the state of Wisconsin issues, statutory guidance that says as a school district can only issue X percent of what your total equalized value is, total value of all district taxing property. The limit, the state statutory limit is 10% of all equalized value. So how that calculates out what your total limit is just over the $529 million there in total debt that you're eligible to issue. And then we compare that to the 73 million that you have already issued. So you've only used 13.9% of your statutory limit. So for a school district, clearly it's going to be very unlikely you would ever hit the statutory total amount that you could potentially issue. That's legally allowable to issue. You're at 13.9% now. At your peak, after the most recent borrowings occurred, you were upwards of 22.3% at its peak. So in all of my years of looking at financial statements and looking at these ratios, I would consider a district to be highly leveraged, and meaning that they're carrying quite a bit of debt, anywhere between the 30%, somewhere in that ballpark as far as if you're trying to figure out where you're at. So long story short, you have the debt capacity if you would need to make an issuance. Not only do you currently have the legal debt limit, obviously, but as far as, in terms of an outside analysis, I would not consider you highly leveraged if you'd have to go out and say borrow, $29 million or something like that. And obviously, as you make your additional payments, that number obviously would only increase because you're meeting, roughly 4.3 to $5 million in principal payments are going to be coming off annually. So that would reduce the total percentage that you would have available for you as well. So that's all I have for my comments for you this evening. Are there any questions that I could address at all?
Questions from board members? I guess I had one because you said that we're not the only school district you do these audits for, right?
Right.
So approximately how many do you have?
Me personally, I do 7 within Western Wisconsin. I think CLA between our Hudson, Rice Lake, and Eau Claire offices, we're upwards of 40.
Okay. And I imagine that includes districts that are a lot smaller than us, but also ones that might be bigger than ours.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So would it be fair to say, relative speaking to, our annual expenditures being about 70, million, 72 million, whatever, that it would be rare for a school district? Do you see anybody having 40 to 45 million just sitting in a fund over and above the unassigned fund, something committed to capital improvements?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of your, going back to page 1, your unassigned fund balance and, sitting aside there ready for capital items.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. What everybody basically does, quote unquote, is in the terms of when you need capital, big projects, how to finance capital projects, it's, 99% of the time it's long-term borrowings. Typically, any repairs and maintenance or smaller things that they can, quote unquote, deal with out of unassigned, yes, they'll definitely take care of those smaller projects in those terms, but it's usually long-term debt.
For systems and buildings that are expected to last for 30 years or more, you don't try to pay those off with just money in the bank type of thing.
Correct.
And so that's where referendums come into play. That's why we have those.
Absolutely. And with everybody dealing with the same budgeting restraints that you're facing, that's set by the state. It's not a local decision in terms of what state financing is going to be. Everybody's facing these similar challenges.
Okay. The other thing in comparison to other districts, are there that many that have tried to be judicious with their spending during COVID, not knowing what, the 2-year, 3-year impact down the road might be?
Especially during COVID, when the whole big question mark was, everybody took kind of the expenditure reins, so to speak, and reined those in. Is kind of, I've been around even when the 2008 timeframe was during, quote unquote, the Great Recession. It was the similar type belt tightening, as all those typical buzzwords that we were hearing. That was, during all the different WASBO presentations and whatnot, and all the information you're getting from the state, everybody digested that in a similar fashion. And when it comes to finance, especially within a local school district or government setting, the number one thing you have control over is your discretionary spending. Clearly, in a school district setting, you don't have that much leeway when it comes to salaries. You need the number of teachers and positions and those clarifying benefits, which is your largest expenditure at a district level. But all of the different discretionary things, delaying repairs and maintenance, delaying upgrades to certain things, that's the main tool, financial lever that you could pull at a district.
All right. Any other questions from any of the board members? All right. Well, I appreciate your work on this. Thank you for the report. And it's always good to hear that, we're on pace to have some good decisions and not in dire crisis mode.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up then we have other reports. I'll turn it over to Nick. You have some reports like on the enrollment.
Yep. So what you have up on the screen is a enrollment analysis. There's been a lot of questions about our enrollment. We've been very upfront with people. It has not been going up. But we also had some questions about, are our kids going to other entities within the school district? And so what you see on this enrollment document, and it's really hard. I don't know, Tim, you can zoom in a little bit more because the stuff to the right's not overly crucial. but what I wanted to be able to show here is we've dropped about 11% of our students over the last 10 years. Yet our number of students served has only dropped about 9.3% because we've picked up some more students in homeschool. Our homeschool percentage has gone up, and we've turned that number around a little bit. When you take out when you take the open enrollment out, we're down about 12.5%. Now, people asked, how does that compare to our private entities in the district? St. Pat's compared to 2014 is running about 67.4% of where they were in 2014, and Trinity is running about 88.8%. So Trinity is about identical with where we are. St. Pat's is taking a little bit more of a hit. Homeschool is up about 13%, but just to give you some reference on the numbers, it's 19 students. So over the course of 10 years, students that reside in the Hudson School District, we're down about 600 kids, but homeschool is only up about 19. So it's not as though kids are going to other places. It is literally that we have fewer kids that live within our boundaries, even when taking into account our private school partners, homeschooling. We just have fewer kids, and this is not any big surprise because when we looked at the enrollment projections, when they talked about the 2010 to 2020 census data, we saw that we were having not only declining enrollment, but we were having declining residents in each of the age groups from 25 to 55. And the reason that's important is those tend to be parent age groups. And yet we had increasing residents within our school district boundaries in every age group over the age of 55. But I just wanted to make sure people had an opportunity to see how do we compare to everybody else. It truly is. We have fewer kids that live in our attendance boundaries. It is not as though everybody is that lives with, and we have to account for all of the kids that live within our attendance boundaries as it relates to the truancy laws of the state. And so this is the second Friday count in January. We also have a September count. The reason I chose to do the second Friday in January is because the homeschool numbers aren't accurate in September. They're usually very low in September because the actual homeschool deadline, Tim, October 15th? And so a lot of parents may not report homeschool numbers until after the third Friday count in September. So in order to get a real accurate representation, as you can see, we had a big drop in enrollment in 2020 into 2021. You can see a large drop of enrollment there and a spike in homeschool numbers that went up. But then the homeschool numbers started to come back down and be pretty close to being in line with, what has typically been happening over the last 10 years. And so I just want to make sure we had that. A couple things I also want to note is if you go up in the colored chart, the reason this chart is colored is it allows you to track a cohort group of kids. And so these would be resident students in our district. So you can see the kindergarten class of 2014, they're currently ninth graders this year. And you can see, okay, that class grew by about 40 students. With the biggest growth, a lot of times happen between 8th and ninth grade. That's pretty typical in our district because that's a lot of times we do have a lot of kids that go to Trinity and St. Pat's that choose then to go to the Hudson School District for high school. That's not always the case. And you can see in some of those grades or some of those years when you go up on the diagonal, there hasn't been a tremendous amount. Like for example, I believe it is from January of 2020 to January of 21. That cohort group from 8th to 9th only went up by 3 kids, and so. But that would also kind of match similar to our enrollment drop that we had at that time. So. As we continue to look at this, we know that one of our largest open enrollment out, and Dave has a better handle on this than anything too, and to Minor, is to virtual schools. That's our largest open enrollment out. And we've actually really started to be able to capture more and more kids, keeping them in our district as we've ramped up our services in virtual education and dual enrollment, dual enrolled type of things as well. But I just really wanted to make sure that people had this information out there because a lot of times they will ask questions. How do we compare to, folks in the area? Are people leaving the Hudson School District to go to private schools or whatever that may be? And you can kind of see this is the data that we've been tracking over the last 10 years. So, questions?
And the focus here is use that term capture rate just again to reiterate for.
Yep.
Because
So
it sounds kind of like
Yeah.
sinister, but.
Yeah, no, so at the bottom, we have a capture rate. So what that is the percentage of students that live within our attendance boundaries that actually attend our schools. So we add up not only the kids that are attending, but also kids that open enroll out, plus the kids that go to parochial schools, plus the kids that are homeschooled. You get that total students in our boundary. You can see that number. It's a second from the bottom there. And then you can see what percentage of those students whose parents choose to send their children to the Hudson School District. And you can kind of see where we're at. We've been pretty consistent. We had a really, our highest capture rate was back in January of 2020, so that was just before COVID happened. We were approaching 90%. Then it dropped the following year, and then now it's started to come back up again. But we're within about 1.2% over the last 10 years. So our capture rate's staying pretty consistent. And what this tells us is it's not a school district everybody doesn't like what Hudson's doing. It is. We truly are dropping school-aged children numbers that live within our boundaries. Yeah.
Yes, Heather.
So 2 quick questions. I think you just answered one. I was going to ask where the total students number comes from, if that's like a census number but it sounds like that is actually adding up the numbers
Yep.
above it. That makes sense.
Yep.
So that's, are the open enrolled out district, does that include students who pay to cross the river and attend private schools in Minnesota? Are they also part of that open enrolled number?
I don't think so. And you're talking about if they happen to be like at the high school age and choose a private school over there?
Correct.
We do not have that number.
Okay.
So that is one number we don't have. It wouldn't be a tremendously high number, but just because when we look at class sizes in 8th grade for Trinity and St. Pat's, we capture the vast majority of those in 9th grade.
So the open enroll out is just students who are open enrolling to another public school?
Correct.
In
Yep,
Wisconsin?
in Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you.
But as far as comparing over this 10-year period, which includes, COVID, that it fluctuated between 86 and 89.5, and we're sitting at 87.2, so it's within
Yeah,
the
we're
average.
within.
It's not a huge roller coaster.
No, it's not a huge roller coaster, and it's, and everybody has different reasons for why they choose to go to different places, and that's totally fine. It's whatever people are comfortable with, where they send their children. But it's just we want to make sure that people understood, the information as to how things are going in the district. It's when we talk about declining enrollment, we're not talking about the district all of a sudden losing kids to all these other entities. It truly is. We have fewer kids that live within our attendance boundaries, and we're capturing our same percentage we always usually have. It's just there's fewer younger families living here, and that's just the way.
Yes,
it is.
Kate.
Do you know what the numbers are for our virtual online school?
Dave,
I could get those for you. I don't have them, but
are you talking about resident students virtual
Right.
or okay? Yeah, we can get those numbers for you.
So our virtual online would be part of our Second Friday count, correct?
Correct.
So you're talking about students who are doing a virtual program elsewhere, is that what you're asking
No,
about,
I'm just
Kate?
curious what our.
Our own? Oh,
Right.
okay.
yeah, so we know we have about 12 kids open enrolled in, but you're asking our resident students. It's well
Right.
over, it's in the hundreds of students that participate, but at various levels, because some take 2 classes, some take several classes, but I can get that information more specifically.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, a couple other items to touch on. Upcoming referendum community engagement dates. Just want to remind people that we have two more community engagement meetings just to get facts out. It's March 21st. There'll be a virtual presentation via Zoom, an opportunity for people to click on and give I'll be doing a Zoom presentation about facts surrounding the referendum. And then March 23rd is our last, district-wide large opportunity for people to come face-to-face district-wide presentation. We do have other presentations with different parent groups, different community groups that have asked us to come and present the information. But these are kind of those, more community-wide presentations. So I just wanted to make sure that those were on there. The next item is our referendum mailer. So we do have a legal obligation, as our attorney talked to the board last time we went to referendum, to explain what exactly it is that we're asking for and where exactly we would be spending the money. We do have an obligation to do that. So what you see here is the mailer. It's just basically a condensed version of what our presentation is, to be able to let people understand what exactly we're asking for, how this may impact them personally, so that they can make informed decisions to either vote against it or vote for it. But there's nothing on here that would say vote yes or vote no. It is just purely, here's the information surrounding it. Here are some of the projects that will be done with the funding, both with the capital funding and the operational question. We also did put the actual questions as they as they appear on the ballots coming up here on April 4th. I'm not sure, Tim, did we ever find out when absentee ballots can be requested or when those go out? Because I know as late as last week, they were still getting all the ballots printed. And
People can get their request for a ballot in, but they're not going to get started mailing out probably, I think, until later next week.
Okay. Yeah.
So is this already mailed, or this is where?
Tracy?
It should be in mailboxes probably tomorrow.
Okay. I only ask because I wonder if moving forward, I still struggle with the equalized property value examples of $100,000, $200,000, and $300,000, because there's not many folks in Hudson with a house that's got a property value of $100,000. And I know the mayor recently spoke at Rotary talking about some of the taxes that are likely to be proposed for the city, and used $300,000, $400,000, and $500,000. That seemed a lot more realistic. And so I don't know how hard it would be to pivot, or maybe we don't want to, because then we're changing our examples. But I mean, I think it would seem it seems a little disingenuous, and even though that's not the intention, but to be losing those really low amounts for property values, when I think the majority of property values would be $300,000 and above.
I think the reason we use the 100,000 is for simple math. So if your property value is 700,000, you would take the example for 100,000 multiplied by 7. Or if yours is 900,000, you could take the example for 300,000 multiplied by 3. So I mean, I think that's why. Otherwise, we could do everything from 100,000 to 1.5 million, and then people would do less multiplying. But I think that's why the 100,000 just is kind of a multiple.
Yeah.
Because the average is, I think, I heard a figure of 337,000 or something like that. So we're not going to put, specific values like that on there.
Yeah, I think, Heather, you make a good point with it, and I know that's something that, we've looked at, and, but really, that 100,000 is the one that kind of means the most to people, because they can figure out what does it mean to their house. So if they have a $550,000 house, they can take it times 5.5 or 3.2 or whatever it is. And I think the reason we just put the additional 2 and 3, again, was just to, give some examples how this starts to stack as you go. But, one of the things that people can always call and ask, or if they have questions, they can always say, well, my house is, $475,000. What is it? What's the impact going to be? And we can try to calculate to the best of our ability for them. And again, it's what we believe the mill rate impact would be as it relates to the school district mill rate. The county is also going for a referendum. I don't believe the city's going for a referendum, and I don't know what the townships are doing, but I do know that the county is. There's going to be 5 referendum questions, I believe, on the ballot, 3 of which are financial. 2 of them, I think, are statewide referendums that have to do more with language related to the state constitution as we work through it. But no, that is good feedback, and we can look at our presentation and make some adjustments as well.
I just want to know why your picture has better lighting than mine.
Well, it's the glare from the top of my head is probably what happens. So, but no, I appreciate that. Because I used to use a different picture, and then people said you don't have that much hair anymore, so you need to update it. So, so I appreciate that feed. Yes, yes. You know, I have a board that doesn't let me out of my office, so you know how that goes. Moving on to inclement weather makeup. You know, we had some questions. We did talk about inclement weather days. It is a very complex calculation. We talked about this at the work session. We have built in, between adding the 10 minutes to the days and making up 3 additional days. That was the February date, the April date, and then adding a day at the end of the year. We have right now an additional, and adding the additional 10 minutes to the school year, we have a cushion of about 3 days and 5 hours. When we started the school year, just to give you an idea what we think we need to deliver our educational programming, we have about 7 extra days at the high school. Is that right, Dave? Closer to 8 extra days at the high school. So we are definitely not making up every single minute as we look at it. So that gives us a little bit of a buffer, because some people might say, well, with the making up days, why did you go ahead and add the 10 minutes? Well, the one thing we do know is if we didn't start adding that early, you have to add a lot of time. If all of a sudden you get a day in April, or as sad as it is to say, sometimes early May, then you're starting to talk about, huge chunks of time. And so we should be sitting in a very good spot. And the question may come up, what do we do if we have more than 3 days and 5 hours of additional snow days between now and the end of the school year? We have kicked around, different ideas. We may have to just add days on to the end of the year. We also have, we have more leeway at the elementary than we do at the secondary. We have a few extra days at the elementary because they require fewer hours. So there may be something that we may be able to do where we do some instruction at the secondary that maybe the elementary may not have to do. Right now we're still working through some of those plans, but I would say at the very least it would be we have those 3 extra days built in right now. So, and then going into next year, as you've been made aware, we're going to have a plan in place that lays out exactly how we would make up time and get those, so people have it at the very beginning of the year and they know this is how it's going to fall as we move forward. So,
Well, and as you're saying that, I think there's a weather bulletin that popped up in our mailbox for a very high probability of more than 4 inches for Thursday night.
I know, I saw that too. And it is a challenge. Apparently it doesn't snow on the weekends in Hudson anymore. So it's only during the week. And it is a challenge for us. It creates some real challenges for us. We've talked about this. People say, why don't you just, easily make up days, call them e-learning? And, I've talked to the board, I've talked to parents. It would be hard for us to say, hey, if we give elementary kids an hour's worth of homework on a day we don't have school, that's equivalent to an entire day of instruction. And I think that's a real hard piece for us to buy into. The secondary, we have a little bit more leeway because we have, one-to-one devices, but we can't always guarantee connectivity. And that's something we did in COVID. We bought a lot of hotspots. Would it be about 150, Dave, we were up to? Somewhere around there in COVID in order to handle our flexible schedules and things. Well, those hotspots are about $50 a month, and we were spending about $7,500 a month just to make sure everybody had connectivity. That's not something that we want to do all the time because we may or may not have some snow days. And I do want to remind people that we do have hours built in, but we do try to make up the days because we think we think we need that time with our kids. But it's always going to be a challenge. We can't build in day after day after day, but we're going to try to show how we'll make up time in future years. Right at the beginning, it'll be right on the calendar. We'll mark out, snow days and things along those lines. Questions?
Any questions on the inclement weather?
Okay.
This
The last
makes-
one
That makes, for the record, was our third school board meeting where
we've talked about it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
March 27th, we've had a request to move that work session to March 28th, Tuesday. I've heard back from, I think, most, I don't know, board members. Everybody but one. And we won't say publicly who the one person is that hasn't responded. So it looks like everybody can make that, Tim, is that right?
So far, yes.
Except the one. And so, so we would move that to that Tuesday, the 28th. I believe there's a choir concert. We have quite a few board members that have kids involved in the Pops concert and things along those lines. So that would be Tuesday, the 28th, same bat time, same bat channel, just a day later. So just wanted to remind people. Questions about that? All right.
Very good. All right, moving on to our agenda for discussion and/or action. We start with consent agenda. Is there a motion with the expenditures? Okay, we didn't rehearse this, I guess. All right, go ahead.
Moved approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,591,222.78.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and I'll turn it over to Andrea. We have a
Yes,
retirement.
We do. So Jamie Peterson, our IT guy, tech specialist is the formal title, is retiring at the end of April, I believe, and he has 26 years of service in the district. So we'll be celebrating him as well as many others in the upcoming banquet, which I believe is May 3rd.
All right, very good. Next up, we have the first reading of our teaching and learning policies, Part 5. And I still have 3 of the policies, procedures up on my tabs from our last meeting. Perfect. Has there been any changes? I mean, we spoke about these at length. You want to give basically the Reader's Digest version of
Yep, absolutely. So
these
we
changes?
we made a few changes. Mainly were just slight revisions. There were a few renumbering issues that we resolved, so those are fixed. There were a couple typos, and then updated pronouns to make sure those were aligned to how we write our policies. For the most part, all these policies were changed to fall into alignment with WASB's recommendation. There's only one on here, that's summer school, that is not a WASB policy, but we felt important to the district because it's something that we think that the board and the community is used to having, not summer school, but a policy providing that guidance. And I think that's pretty much it.
Well, we're deleting a procedure regarding extracurricular. That's because it was not recommended by WASB?
That is correct, but then that is, it's really, there's a different policy that covers the same topics.
Right, okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
So just not to state the obvious, but my understanding is the reason that we lean so heavily on the WASB, Wisconsin Association of School Board, policy templates is that they have all been through legal review, right?
That is
So that's
correct.
a big reason we lean on them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Try to avoid reinventing the wheel and potentially making a mistake that then leads to exposure for lawsuit or whatever. And frankly, I mean, you can write the best policies in the world. There's always going to be unique fact scenarios that still require, and that's why these are written with a lot of deference to administration, implementation.
And one note for everyone, if you're reviewing the policies, go to the final link, which is the policies without markup. Some of the most recent adjustments are only reflected there. They will be reflected in the upper documents the next time you see them. But right now, that bottom link that represents the actual policies that you would be ultimately approving would be represented in that bottom link.
So, and you had mentioned this, but the only one that's not a typical WASB policy is summer school. Summer schools, yeah, summer school is the only one that's unique to our district. What was the thinking there, just to, on policy
It's
351?
historic policy. We've had it forever, and the guidance is good guidance. It's not really necessary in that it mostly falls under administrative purview anyway, but thought that because we're used to it and we're trying to improve summer school, that it made sense not to eliminate a policy. Sometimes when we eliminate a policy, it could create confusion as to why is that no longer important. We didn't want to send that message.
Right. And now, how many within this teaching and learning purview do we have left after this?
There will be 2 more selections, and
more
they'll be
sets.
coming consecutive months. So the next work session will have the 6th selection, and then you'll be overlapping with a first reading and a second reading, and then the following work session, the 7th and final selection.
Well, I guess there's none of the other policy overall sections that have 7 parts to them, but that's because teaching and learning, which is where it should be, is the focus, right?
Is the most important of all departments, right? Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay. So, anyone else have any questions? So, I will otherwise entertain a motion to approve the first reading.
I would move to approve the first reading with one tweak. I believe in policy 381, there should be a semicolon at the end of the opening paragraph.
I'm glad you caught that. See, I put a few things in there just
Just
to
to
keep you
make
on
sure
your
I was
toes, yeah.
looking.
So
Thank you.
semicolon 381.
Yes, yes, approve with that change.
Okay.
I missed that, but I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the first reading of Part 5 of Teaching and Learning Policies signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. So next up, we have the 23-24 school year advertising fee schedule.
It's the same fee schedule that you saw at the work session, so the recommendation would be to approve.
All right. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Molly has the second to Bob's motion. Any further discussion or questions? But again, this is something that we don't necessarily change them every year, but based on, what the practice had been, and they've done a good job of selling some of these slots, but again, the significance of the purple and the white was just to set apart the different sections, or? Okay. There's no other big changes, though. All right. Hearing no further questions or discussion, all those in favor of approving this updated advertising and sponsorship fee schedule moving forward for the 23-24 year and maybe beyond, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay, and the ayes have it. Finally, we have in our open session the middle school and Hudson Prairie parking lot replacement. Again, another item that has been looked at for a while, and we got bids. I think there was an issue with the bidding process, why it was taken off previous agendas, but we spoke at this at length at the work session, and I don't know, Nick or Bonnie, do you want to address this?
It did follow up with the architect, and phasing can be done in order to accommodate anything that we need to accommodate related to work done at the middle school. However, he also did say that there's not any really heavy equipment that we required on the middle school projects that would, they believe in their estimate, damage our parking lot should we choose to replace them now. But so we could move forward. The big thing is any delay, he'd estimate somewhere between 8 and 10% would be the inflationary cost between this summer and next summer. And So we could delay like a portion of it, which is the front area, but was very confident that based on what happens on April 4th, we could make adjustments to this and at least get on the schedule and get the bulk of the work done without having to worry about any issues.
All right, and we have the two bids, being one 678,000 or so, and the other 820, just under 821. I'm assuming the administration is recommending the one that is less. And also recognize that
yes,
contractor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bonnie, unless you want to pay more.
No, I'm good with it, yeah.
And I don't know if you have anything you want to add, Bonnie, to the process.
I guess I would just like to add about the proposed funding. So when the auditor was here and he was talking about those reserve funds, so that big chunk, the 398, comes out of those funds from the last referendum that we really should get expended because we've closed that out. So that's the bulk of it, and then the second portion would come out of our operating capital budget.
So that's part of the fact that we brought the middle school project in under budget. Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
I just have a question. Is there any more funds left in that referendum account after that then?
There is about 59,000 for the sports complex and auditorium. So we have been working with the high school to look at their sound towers and shells as an opportunity for those.
For the choir.
Yep.
Right. So like on the 2016 referendum, which was 7 years ago, when we went to the public and asked to borrow up to that amount, once we bought the bonds, then you got to spend the money. And at the high school, we were under budget. We actually had a motion to reduce the amount we borrowed because it was up to, so there was
I don't remember who
500,000.
did that. Who did that? Was that
I don't know.
somebody that,
I
didn't
guess
let us-
that was Tightwad Johnson. All right.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, is there any other questions on this?
But going back to Kate's question, so there's the two different referendums. So there's 59,000 left because we actually had three referendums. So we had the high school referendum, then we had the sports and auditorium referendum, and we had the middle school referendum. This is expending the balance of the middle school referendum that can only be spent on middle school projects. There's still about 59,000 left in the stadium/auditorium referendum that has to only be spent on stadium or auditorium projects. In the high school, the largest portion of the referendum, the high school referendum, that was completely expended because somebody wouldn't let us borrow the last 500,000. But I mean, I'm not bringing that up, but I'm just saying as we work through it. So that's
It was a 7-0 vote to the board. so.
yes, that's it.
Well, I think but for that last 59,000, I mean, Kate asked the question, so I mean,
There will be a report on that, and it looks like right now it's going to be expended as it relates to choir and something related to sound shells in the auditorium is where the funds are going to be. Not the outside stadium, no.
I was just waiting to repaint that track again. But anyway, that's a sore subject too.
Yeah, I know he does.
All right. Anything else on this? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of administration and go with Zappa for the amount stated on the bid.
Motion to approve as stated. Is that good enough?
Okay. All right. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the recommendation is adopted. I will now entertain a motion to go into closed session, from which we will adjourn for the evening and not come back to open session.
I just wanted to see, were we going through, I see one for early college credit program?
That was in the consent agenda, right?
So because it was our ongoing contracts go into consent agenda. Any new contracts you guys will vote on separately in the regular action. But because it's just a continuation of what you've already approved in the past, we put it in the consent agenda. So, but no, that's a good question. Thank you.
Yes.
And I think if I understand, if there's an item in the consent agenda that we want to discuss, then at the opening of the meeting, before we approve the agenda, we would request that item be pulled out of the consent agenda and put in for discussion, right?
So items can be pulled out that are in there, but we don't put anything in the consent agenda if it's a brand new type of contract that hasn't been discussed before. All right.
Correct.
Who has the best eyesight to be able to read that? So,
Mr. President,
okay.
I have it on my computer. Motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to discuss and take action, if appropriate, regarding the employment and performance evaluation data of public employees over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, consideration of certified and administrative staff employment, resignation, retirement, and/or preliminary notice of contract non-renewal and/or layoff.
All right. Motion by Carrie. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kate. All those in favor? Well, we have to do the roll call. So it's Bauman.
Aye.
Garza. Logland. Powers. Whitaker. And Johnson, aye. The ayes have it. We stand adjourned at 7:30. And